Yeah, we are. We are very live. You
We are
probably
live.
seen that.
All right.
Great.
Hi,
So,
everybody.
um, welcome everyone to Science of Business podcast. And today we have Nuno Branco with us, a trainer, consultant, and an author of a book that is not even finished, but I was very lucky to already read it, and we will discuss it a bit. The book that doesn't even have a title yet, right?
That's
Not.
right. I mean, it's got a working title, which I'm changing pretty much on a daily basis, but yeah, the latest one is something like, projects and relationships, 29 ways we can do them better. The do better part is largely
Yeah.
inspired by a friend of mine called Radek, who, yes, gave me some very good feedback.
And 29, that's like I read it, and it's for me, um it is a certain manifesto of how we should work, how we should treat people in our workplace. And just before the show we were discussing, you disagreed with me, but I think this is the very same way as the piece by Jordan Peterson. So he proposed 12 rules to live by, and for me what you proposed are really deep level messages on how we should twist, how we should break some weird things that we build around our workplace that are not really healthy for anyone, that are stressing us out and are bringing us farther from each other in those relations. So keep on disagreeing with me, but I think this has a huge potential to make a difference. And I wanted to ask you, yeah, like where is it coming from? How did you come up with writing those?
I mean, you're very kind saying those things. I will disagree in a bit again, but I just want to say, I think the main what made me what prompted me to do this is to just challenge a little bit this tradition that is deeply ingrained in all of us in our society, that business is business and that it's apart from everything else, and that yes, we can have ethical lives, we can be good people to our family and to our friends, and but then when it comes to business, we have a little bit more leeway. Morally speaking, we can kind of manipulate things a little bit more because it's business after all. So we use business as a pretext, as a kind of a justification, to do things that are not really right, and we know now are not conducive to the best possible interactions that you can have and to the best business that you can have. They're just simply not good practice, many of those things. It's all the more difficult because we cannot even see, we're not even conscious that we're doing certain things with each other, that we're sussing each other out, that we're like trying to think, okay, how can we get the deal? How can I get him to buy, or how can I get her to have a certain reaction? And we can't see it because most of the trainings out there on negotiation, on communication, all are about tactics. How
Yeah.
to get them to say yes, how to go past no, how to do this, how to do that, which is fine, by the way. I mean, there's a lot to learn there as well. But I just think that it's time that we move on to the next stage of all of that, which is, what I think is a kind of quite radical idea, even if it sounds a little, I don't know, it could sound a little cliche, but I think it's a very profound and radical idea that essentially we're on the planet to connect with each other, to love each other and to learn to live together, and work for the greater good. I mean, this is a spiritually old mission or norm, let's say, something that we do know deep down, but we have chosen through business and certain initiatives to disconnect from that truth. And that's very confusing, very stress-inducing,
Yeah.
and just kind of get us started on the wrong foot, Regarding the comparison with Jordan Peterson, which thank you very much, but I really don't see it, but simply because you're talking about a very experienced scholar who has put his work out there in a very brilliant way. As I said before, I don't always agree with him. Sometimes I think some of the messages are a little bit repressive, but I find that on the whole, he is someone who takes risks, and I very much appreciate that, and really makes you think. And I, and well, and he attempts that all of us get our lives in order. So I also appreciate that as well. So thanks anyway.
Yeah, I'd say your work and your ideas really made me think, and I believe that it will also make our listeners think a little bit about how we build relations, and maybe we can go into that actually. So I have
Mhm.
two research papers for you today to discuss with you. Quite fresh ones. One from 2018, the other from 2019. And the first one is about the new era of workplace relationships, and about something called social exchange theory. And just to give a little bit of context, back until 2018, back until this paper, social exchange theory is a definition of how workplace relations work. So we basically exchange our moods, emotions, our what we need in the workplace. What you said, okay, I want to get this from my client, and I will offer something else. But then the authors claim that right now the workplace and the work market, the job market, is so wild in a way, so ambiguous, so diverse, that basically it's not that simple anymore, and it's not always about a calculation what's not worth investing my time, but in many ways you need to first build those relations, because otherwise, just a fun fact from this research is that people who are freelance are not that willing to help others in their team, like just by the type of contract you have in the very same team, you're also reluctant to help people.
Yeah.
And from this, I wanted to hear from you if you could maybe elaborate more about how do you see the relations in workplace nowadays. And
Okay. Well, it's so interesting that you say that, freelancers, for example, or people who are working remotely, as that research demonstrates, right, that they're not that willing to share what they know, which they feel that they have worked very hard for. They're not that willing to share with others, but why is that, right? If we go to the root of that, there's a wound there. The wound is, we think that there's not enough for everybody. We think there's so much competition out there, and that we have to hold on to what we've got, which we work very hard to either obtain or study or learn or whatever. And people, in these types of circles, they talk about having your own expertise, your specialty, something that only you can deliver. Therefore, you shouldn't share it that openly with others. For me, obviously, that's not the right approach, because that's that comes from a wound. So it's a reactive kind of approach, right? And it doesn't tap into abundance, because it assumes that the world is an unfriendly place rather than a friendly place. Hence, everything that you will find will sort of reflect that assumption that you make, right? Because the moment I think of I don't know, a red apple, I will see red apples a lot more easily. Or the moment I think of a jeep, I will see jeeps. So that's what my mind will then
yeah,
show me. Yeah, because it wants to it wants to work with me, kind of thing. So I would say that, I think it was Albert Einstein who said that you have to make a decision, which is decide if the world is a friendly place, or the universe, if the universe is a friendly place or an unfriendly place, and then live your life accordingly. And I think
mm,
all of us want to think, we would love to think
yeah,
that the world is indeed a friendly place. So there
it's
is enough for everybody. Yeah.
quite a pleasant mindset change if we let go of our fears. And I have a very nice recent story about that. Is that I shared with you earlier, I'm working on a conference for human resources, and basically this project is ridiculous from the point of view of my what I gain from that, of why I'm doing that. I'm just doing that because that's a great thing to do, and then I'm investing a lot of time to make that happen. And I'm very honest and transparent with everyone that joins. And then I realized, and that's I'm not that strategic in deciding what I invest my time in. I just like think like, wow, that's so awesome, let's do that. And then surprisingly, people help, people offer some unrelated proposals how we could do something else together, because they got inspired that we can you can do something. And I had zero of those plans. And people ask me like, hey, what do you get from that? Like, why are you investing this much time? Why this conference is free? Like, hey, you could like make a lot of money out of it. And yeah, but if I did that, this wouldn't be then the biggest conference in Poland if it was paid for, right? Like now it's easier to make the biggest, and yet with the best speakers all together in the very same time. And surprisingly, I get some stuff. I just didn't really focus on that. I focused on something else, on doing something nice with people, with people, and working with them. And I think like it's for me it was a revelation in a way, when I realized, if you just do things, if you do things with love, with joy, um, things come around, and you don't have to really plan them up front. Because I believe if I planned, okay, I do
Right.
this because I want to have 5 partners out of this conference, probably this goal would complicate, actually, even would make it harder to achieve it to some extent, or to achieve other goals which were important, right?
Mm. I just want to jump in because I was listening to you and I was thinking, he's just describing the story of my life, precisely that, getting myself into projects that would apparently have no reward whatsoever, no real sort of reason for me to do them. But that's the thing, there is one thing that is the key factor here, which is trust, right? You don't know
Yeah.
why. You don't know why you're going to do it, but you just trust. There's a voice in you, and and it feels good to do it. It feels right in your stomach and in your heart, kind of thing, right? I think your cat agrees with me, and yeah, and and the same, for example, when people are very much, when they're applying for jobs, for example, they're very focused on their CV and all that kind of stuff. But many times what I have, and you mentioned human resources so instantly, I thought of that, more and more times, more and more frequently, I see this happening, that people within a human resources context, they're like sort of selecting the candidates, and they go like, you know what, I don't know why. Yeah, he's not the best candidate, not the best one on paper, but there's just something about them. And I think I'm going to go for them. So ultimately, things either sort of interact and speak to you for whatever reason or not. And all of that stuff is deeper and it's more meaningful. And strategy and tactics and thinking that we have to come up with the best solution or whatever, that only gets in the way, kind of thing. So and yes, and in my text I also talk about that. We don't need to strategize that much. I'm not saying don't strategize at all, but we don't need to rely exclusively on that, because that will interfere with what would be then a much more natural process that would unfold. And I think more and more, people are talking about this. People are talking about flow, getting into states of flow, co-creation, soft skills, emotional intelligence. All of this is about developing, let's say, magnetic qualities rather than the usual electrical charge qualities, as in like, we're going to make it happen. We're going to, do whatever needs to be done, work very hard for something. That's not the zeitgeist, I think, of our times right now. Yes, that's fine. We've developed a lot of technology with that, having an aim, having an objective, working hard for something, that kind of thing, subject-object relationship. But I think now the times are a little different. They are beckoning for us to co-create, to do things together. and to kind of feel each other a little bit more. So it's a much more intuitive process. It's about realizing that intuition that we all have. It's not a special skill, by the way. We all have it. We can just choose to connect with it or disconnect from it. But yeah. So clearly you were following your intuition by getting into that
Yeah.
conference, all those things. So I applaud you for that, really.
And just before we move on, I have another paper on servant leadership that I wanted to discuss with you more thoroughly. But there is something I really loved in your book. One of the lessons, which was to build a common legacy rather than your own. And just to, I wanted to hear out from you and maybe to inspire our listeners on that. Like, how do you perceive building a common legacy? What do you mean by that?
Wow, that's a good question. And at this moment, right now, I actually don't remember what I wrote in that chapter. But for me, the idea, and I'm sure it will relate to that. So, because the idea for me is clear, how can I say? I used to think, I still do. I used to think that it was very noble, to think, okay, what am I going to leave behind? Am I going to leave the world in a better place before I was here? What have I contributed? But I do think there's a big difference between doing that because you kind of want to live forever and you want something to live in your place, in your name, when you're not here anymore, something that people will remember you by, right? Uh, there's a difference between that, which is not wrong, but it is what it is. It's human, okay? Um, there's a difference between that and thinking, what are we going to leave behind, not because of your name, but just kind of what kind of world are we going to live, to our children,
Mhm.
not our own necessarily, but everybody's, like the future generations, basically. And that takes a common effort. That takes a common goal, a common decision, conscious or unconscious, but the more conscious, the better, and realizing that all kids are your kids, not just your own kids, but kids on the other side of the world, they're your kids too.
Yeah.
And so I'm not necessarily saying, oh, we have to be dramatic and climate change and all that stuff. I mean, I would never tell other people what to be, what their legacy should be about, right? Because that's up to them and they will know. But I know that for me personally, I'm definitely interested in thinking a little bit more collectively. Um, and yeah, and I mean, and that starts like right now with certain decisions that I make in my own life that I think, what, maybe this is what I wouldn't, it's not what I necessarily want to do, or that I feel it would be, serves me the best, but I'm going to choose to sacrifice that aspect of me that is only thinking about myself for the greater good if I think that that's justifiable. And I think it's just having a sense of nobility, and
Mhm.
to noble up. I love that expression, to
Yeah.
noble up, to become more noble. And I think we have no choice at the moment. Yeah. So,
And this letting go of your own um, desire to achieve into the achievement itself for the community, for the group, for the team you're working in. It reminds me there was a paper, I just can't recall now, on leadership, which claimed that a good leader is always thinking about the team, and the team achievement is their own, and that's how they fulfill themselves, because their team fulfilled themselves. Yesterday I was watching Dune for the first time, and just I loved it a lot. But also there was a quotation on leadership about leaders do not seek for that. The great leaders, they just are, they are up to the challenge when they're needed. It's not that you are there for leadership, but you are there when the challenge appears, and you can help people achieve that, and you can yeah, you can serve them in a way. And
Absolutely. And and I just want to say this, that when I said, well, a certain measure of sacrifice, you're not sacrificing really anything that is that would be truly beneficial. You're sacrificing something that ultimately doesn't matter. It's not ultimately true. Because the thing is here, all we have to sort of think is, what's more fun? What gives us more joy? And we are wired for this. We know that when we do something for others, when we behave altruistically, when we decide to be generous, that's when we feel the highest possible joy, right? So, the celebration of oneself, great. I mean, of course I can feel proud for certain actions, but it's just not the highest joy. It's way more fun to contribute to the whole kind of thing. When you're serving, and I yeah, talking about servant leadership, and which is a great model. I mean, it's tapping into, I don't want to bring the G word, the God word, but God, spirituality, the universe, it doesn't matter, love, whatever name you want to give it, right? um, when you step into service,
Hmm.
that's when you connect with that, with that power greater than you, if you just kind of disconnect from that, right? uh, and it's not a special power as such, because not, we all have it, kind of thing. But for me, so it's not even about believing in that, but it's about believing in each other.
Hmm.
That is ultimately, I think, the great
Yeah.
divine
In
experience.
in his latest approach to hierarchy of needs, Maslow has put transcendence in the top. This exactly this feeling when we help others self-actualize to achieve better, and you let go of yourself. You are altruistic in this matter. And actually, the paper I wanted to talk with you about on servant leadership is tapping into spirituality at workplace. So
Yeah.
the authors made a critical review and published in International Journal on Leadership. And what what they propose is that, in a way, servant leadership is building this spirituality in the workplace, you want it or not. But basically you bring trust, you bring honesty, you bring acceptance, and this, this kind of commune feeling inside your team. So that's a great starter for this paper. But what I specifically want to talk with you about is that in this review, and I recommend it to all the listeners, because it's quite um, pragmatic in showing how leadership works in the servant leadership model. But they listed 6 characteristics of it, and I wanted to briefly discuss with you each of them, and how we can actually live to them, because I know you're not that up to processes and into
Right.
making concrete tactics. But in general, how do you think we can understand it and try to live by? So the very first is value for people, one of those 6. And how do you think we can use that for our team to actually lead them in a more relationship based way?
Okay. I mean, I will just say that there is, I think, a major, I'm going to call it characteristic, or let's say, yeah, I'm going to go with that, underlying all of those things, right? Which is, it's easy to love people, value people, develop a culture of trust, all of those things, if people behave the way you would love them to behave, the way you think that is the right way to behave. It's when they don't, that's when the challenge, the real challenge comes. And because that's when your reactive juices are activated and you feel tempted to act from a place that is not a loving place, that is not a place of goodwill, or the real test is, can I still add value to someone in my team? Can I still highlight how amazing they are? Can I still trust them when they are showing otherwise? right?
Yeah.
When they're showing me the human and not the, let's say, the divine in them so easily. So what do I do then? That's like the basic challenge underlying all of these things,
Mhm.
and it pushes us to go inward, right? And to still wish them for the best despite all of that. So it kind of pushes us to see the light in them, even when they're showing me the most, the darkest kind of
Yeah.
behavior. And that's a very
Especially
difficult exercise.
especially because of the negativity bias, right? So if we have a misbehaving team member, we can focus on that. We can focus on the negativity, forgetting the value they provide to the team. So I think that's a great habit to build, something to be mindful about when we face it in our teams, when something doesn't work the way it should. How can I still, for myself, value the people? It's just whenever I talk with entrepreneurs about sales, I always refer to that, like, if you don't see the value in what you're offering, you will never succeed. You need to really believe, understand it, like do your homework for that, to see if you actually can offer some value to the people before you go and sell it. And I think, and here it's the same. We need to sell our team members to ourselves
Mm.
um, to achieve that. Do you agree?
Well, absolutely. I mean, and it's a real challenge. I mean, all this stuff, it's very difficult to do. I just think it's even more difficult not to do it than to do it. But it does. I mean, I know that for myself, if I don't step into a daily practice of prayer and meditation, I am a lot more likely to mess things up when those challenging interactions come up. You know, than I then if I at least at the beginning of the day I dedicate my day to, let's say, to serving the highest good and all those things in whatever way, that there are a multitude of ways in which we can do that. I like to do it in the morning, when my head is fresh, and to have some, at least a few minutes to dedicate that and read stuff that really inspires me, and I find that the rest of the day will go a lot more smoothly, meaning I can serve a little bit more, and I will not get so out of myself if something really triggering comes up, which it will, by the way, because that's
Yeah,
what the world is like, right? That's what the world is
exactly.
like. So I'm very optimistic that we are collectively, if we so wish, we can. We're at a good tipping point. We can co-create great things right now, right this minute. And I think this podcast is an example of that. But we also shouldn't be naive, and we have to know that we're still human. We still have a certain alliance with darkness, because we're still vengeful. We still want people to pay if they do something wrong, and we still want all that stuff. Like, oh, who does he think he is when he said that, or when she that or did that, or whatever. So I think it's very difficult, but I think it's necessary. And a good leader in that sense, or it is someone who has done or continues to do the inner work, and is not afraid to go deeper, go into a vulnerable space. Now, I just have to say that sometimes that meditation, that inner work, will tell you, will direct you, will guide you to put a limit, right? But it's very different to put a limit lovingly, than it is doing it from a very reactive space. That it's a very different kind of
Hmm.
outcome. Yeah.
Hmm. All right.
If
I
I'm
would
answering
move
the question.
on to the yeah, we have covered some concrete, for me some concrete attitudes, and the second one develops people. The second characteristic of servant leader, I think it's even more challenging in one way. Like, obviously we have a lot of tools. We have training, we have coaching, we have mentoring. We can set up development paths for our people, for our team. But I wonder what is deeper in here also, in this attitude. If you think, maybe not, but I would like to discuss it a bit, if there is some level of attitude that can help or work against us, the team leaders, trying to develop our people, like how our rooted beliefs, rooted attitudes work in this part.
All right. Well, I think I don't know who said this, but I love this sentence that true leadership is holding space for the brilliance of others. Right. Um, for me, to hold the idea of holding space for the brilliance of others is also holding space for an encounter of minds and hearts. So it's the brilliance of together, of, it's not so important for me if someone is, intelligent or not intelligent. That's old news. I don't care about that. It's the encounter that produces intelligence, right? It's talking, it's interacting. That is the intelligence that I'm interested in, right? That's the co-creation part. And I think you cannot, so that attitude right there, by believing in that encounter, you are holding space for the brilliance of others to shine, right? And you know that it will shine because it's in your presence, and if you have that attitude, people will feel good and relaxed in your presence. They will want to raise the bar. They will want to live up to what your expectation is, because it comes from the heart, from a space that wants the best for them, right? So people will not know why, but they will just feel good in your presence because they can sense that there's love there. There's a sense of goodwill, of best wishes, that you really want them to sort of develop themselves. And ultimately, there's no separation between your own development and their development. It's what you said earlier, right? It's there's no separation. It's the same. We're all one anyway, right? So that's one thing. I also think, that developing people sometimes also means being a little hard on them when necessary. What I mean by that is believing in their ability to take hard criticism when necessary, constructive always, forward-looking always, so integrated into a forward-looking message. But I think it's very important not to shy away from telling people, obviously with the greatest respect and consideration, but believing in their ability to receive that feedback. That is also very empowering, and it develops them way more than it would to not say anything for fear of whatever, right? Because that would be a way of pitying people, or not believing that they can handle it, that they can take it. If you see that they can't, then obviously you need to take that into consideration and sort of go step by step, right? But that's another aspect. I can't hear you, sorry. The sound is
muted. I was muted. That's why.
okay.
So it means you don't have to really be polite just for the sake of being polite and to be the most likable leader, but it's not the same as the best leader, and in a way.
I mean, the thing is, like, if you have, let's say, prayed and meditate that day, it will come naturally how you should speak to that person at that particular moment, right? Because if at the beginning of your day you say, all right, so I really want to do my best, give my best, speak my best, and speak, say the right things to the right people at the right time. So all of that will be part of a natural process, and I would say one more thing, right, that I which is a little controversial, and I'm just thinking out loud as I go along, so I'm not sure about this, but I'm going to share with you anyway, and with the listeners anyway. There's this, let's say, this attitude usually in companies, which is, when people are not performing to the best of their abilities, after giving them, an opportunity and another one, people think, right, this guy or this person is not the right fit for the company. They're not the right profile, or they don't have the right the right whatever, and the easiest thing is to fire them, to get rid of them, right? And I think in when the culture of a company is a little impatient, right, you see that happening with relative frequency. I personally don't hold with that. I think there has to be, I don't know how to say this, but I think if people think that, you know what, that their leaders or the culture that they are integrated into will do everything they can to retain them, not well, to retain them and to develop them and to find the right avenue for their talents and to support them all the way, and to have very clear that that human and humane connection is the real driver, right? That high-minded partnership is the real driver of performance, because it's when you get that right, that's when you can increase personal performance, organizational performance, but you start with the human connection first, not the other way around, which is what most companies still do. But that just food for thought. I'm still thinking on this one, but there's a degree of security there that I think would be very empowering if people could sense, if that it was there. I don't know
Also,
what you
you
think.
reminded me of a research. You mentioned this meditation and prayer, and basically, it sounds spiritual and not that science based. But the fun fact is, or there was a research on leaders when they were meditating on what kind of a leader should they be. So they were thinking, okay, I want to be a leader that is patient, that is giving a honest feedback, and so on. And they just practice it over time, several times. They did. They so meditate it till you become it in a way. So you can
Mm.
call it a meditation, you can call it a prayer in this aspect, but just really thinking through how you behave and how you want to behave is actually scientifically proven to help your performance. And with that comment, I want to move to another one because we still have some topics to discuss, and this is a challenging one, I believe. So even when you build Facebook group or whatever forum, it sounds simple. You just create it, you invite people, and it happens, but it doesn't. The community is a craft. It really requires a lot of effort to build something that you can honestly call a community, that people feel a part of it, that they feel connected. So I wonder, it's a huge topic, and I'm already thinking I will probably also create another podcast dedicated to community.
You should.
But still, I think there is something we can already
Yeah.
discuss. Like, how do you believe the leader can build a community inside their team with these attitudes, with their
Okay.
mindset to some extent?
Yeah, well, I think there's a very concrete way in which this can be done. We almost touched on that earlier on when we talked about co-creation. So traditionally, right, we have a customer-centric culture in business. Very much focused on what the customer wants and serving the customer. But things have changed and are changing. Not that that one is not valid, but there's a bit of an upgrade and there's a bit of a development there, which is in many domains, in many areas of life, the consumer wants to be a producer too. And I think that's the shift right there, and that truly creates a whole new level of community with new meanings of what that can imply. For what that can imply. So, for example, if you think, I'm going to give you different examples across the board,
Mhm.
right? I'm going to start with health, actually, with the doctor-patient relationship, because I think it's a very interesting one. Traditionally, the figure of the doctor is, the go-to person who knows it all and tells you what to do, prescribes you whatever, and you follow the instruction, and that's it. But nowadays, I think with the internet, but also many other factors, right? More and more, especially the younger generations, they also want to take charge for their own health, right? both on a preventative level, but also on a, I don't know, I think you call it allopathic level. So like when you want to sort of cure any kind of disease. And one of the best examples for this is, if you go into a cancer ward at a hospital, if you, I mean, 30, 40, 50 years ago, you would go into such a ward and ask people, okay, what kind of treatment are you doing? People would say, oh, I'm doing chemotherapy. But you go into a cancer ward these days, people will tell you the names of the drugs that they're taking, the different experiments, what you have in America, what you have in Paris, what you have in London, what you have somewhere in India. They have, conducted, if they are so if they are so inclined, but they have conducted their own research, and they sort of suggest, they kind of co-create with the doctors, different possibilities, right? This is not an unusual thing anymore. People really get informed, and even if they're not doctors themselves, but they get informed, and they sort of decide to complement that with complementary therapies and techniques like Reiki, like yoga, like this, like that, right? So that's one such example. Another example is in the world of magazines, for example, that you have not just the typical writer and reader interaction, but now the reader makes comments too. Sometimes they co-create the articles. Sometimes they have their own blog in a magazine. There's social media, the whole thing. So there's a lot more of a co-creation that people want to participate. They don't want to just, watch or sit quiet or whatever. They want to interact. Or when you go to restaurants and you're busy, sometimes you even participate in the cooking, or you're drawing on the table, or whatever it is. There are so many examples of this. I think one of the things to bear in mind is that the aspect of communication that most companies now, I don't want to say most companies, but most innovative companies, certainly, they are media companies too, right? Uh, they're Googles, they're Facebooks, they are all these things, because they have that communication element as an integral part, even if that's not the core business, but it's an integral part of their business, and that's certainly part of creating, a true community. And then I think another thing that people want, apart from also wanting to be a producer, but it's linked with that, is they want something that will develop them, right? Spiritually, personally, personal development, personal growth. It will make them, you know, it, before you could talk about in fact, there's a book called like this, The Experience Economy, right? Where people would imagine, pay 15 euros for a coffee at La Piazza San Marco in Venice, because, okay, you're not paying for the coffee, the actual coffee, you're paying for the experience of being in such a place, maybe with someone that is dear to you, and it's a moment that you will treasure forever, and you pay for that. Great. Now we, I think, are moving into a relationship-centric economy, where that sense of true community is a lot more possible, and it's not just the experience, it's the relationship that I have, it's that conversation that I had that really did it for me, that really will make me sort of remember this forever. And that's part of an economy. I mean, that's certainly even luxury firms have picked up on this. When you go into, I don't know, I really don't know, but when you go into a Gucci, a Chanel shop, or whatever, they are very invested. Some of them, not all of them, but they're very invested in having in creating an intimate moment with their customers. And that's the real luxury there as well, that you wouldn't get in a normal shop, kind of thing. So I could go on, but I don't know if that answers.
Yeah. For me, the key word is involvement, is
Yeah.
making people included, being inclusive in your work, and this for me relates very well with another one, which is sharing leadership. So
Mm,
you basically, as a leader, you don't own the decisions, you include the team. Sometimes you even share some responsibility for leadership to build naturally your successors, to support
mm,
your team to grow up to your level and beyond, because in many ways, in many cultures, we have leaders which are usually more experienced in the company, more experienced in the work they do. So it resonates with me very well that it's very connected, this building community and sharing leadership. And because
yeah.
I'm also a bit mindful about the time, and there is one more, just to finish the list. We have also providing leadership, and we have also displaying authenticity. And I believe also authenticity is one of the ways to provide leadership, because there is plenty, and I believe we will also have plenty of podcasts on leadership in the future. So right now I want to ask you about this authenticity. So how do you imagine an authentic leader in their team, how they can
Okay.
display this authenticity?
Okay. Um, all right. So I want to go, I'm going to try to reply to that, uh, mentioning something in response to what you said before about involvement, because I'm going to use that door, right? Um, when you're involving others, there's a degree of authenticity there already, a profound degree of authenticity, as like, hey, these are my intentions. There's a coherence, a practice of coherence there. So the authenticity is, let's say, a base, a clarity, right, in intention, in communication, in the involvement, in making people feel that they are part of the big picture, right? I think it was Stephen Covey who wrote The 7 Habits of Highly
Hmm.
Effective People years and years and years ago. But so many of the points are still so valid that, he said that if you get people together in groups to talk about solutions to certain problems, they will most likely come up with very similar, if not the very same ideas that they would have received from the top down, after certain board meetings or whatever, in a kind of very sort of structured, hierarchical company kind of thing. So clearly they would feel a lot more involved if they have participated in creating those solutions themselves. They will be way more likely to execute them with enthusiasm if they are just given the instruction from the top down without any explanation as to why and so on. So authenticity for me is very, let's say, associated with involvement and with transparency. So authenticity is not just speaking authentically, right? It's a clarity that is there. It's there in the statements. It's there in the interactions. It's there in the community that we develop over the course of time. Now, I realize that the word authenticity for me is a tricky one. I don't dislike it, but I think we have to be mindful, right, of how this word, having become a buzzword, because you have books written on
Hmm.
authenticity and so many people talk about this. We have to be mindful that, yes, it's great to talk about authenticity, but not just associated with serving an exclusively corporatist agenda, right? Because many times, or I think the context in which authenticity is discussed, we have to be authentic so that we can then get the deal because people perceive you as being authentic, and then it's another strategy, right?
Hmm.
For example, that on a kind of on a corporate level. On a personal level, I think we also need to be a little careful because imagine I'm talking to you and I'm very angry, at that moment. Well, what I feel authentically at that moment, could could sort of inspire me to say the most barbaric things and make terrible comments. And you're like, no, what do you want about? What are you saying? And I'm like, oh, hey, I'm just being authentic. Well, so I think
Hmm.
one thing is the base authenticity and the temporary authenticity, which we have to be careful about, so it's because otherwise, I might say something that I would then regret
Yeah.
later. So authenticity sometimes is about, crazy as it sounds, is about not communicating what we authentically feel in a given moment, if that's just going to be pushing destructive button kind of
Mhm.
thing. So I don't know
Yeah,
if that
but
speaks
yeah,
to.
I think so. I think I just in this situation of being angry or whenever whatever emotions uh, take the lead of your behaviors, the authentic response could be just like at this moment I'm very angry and I cannot really you know move on with this conversation. So maybe we can take a break and talk about it later on. It's whatever, like, so this authenticity is about being honest, not necessarily about expressing everything, and just being yourself still, not trying to put a a new mask whenever you enter the office, and then you're a joker in your home, and then you're going to the office and you're the most serious person out there. It's just tiring. and and probably this is one of the fences we build over time in the corporate world. And also I see it in the training business. It's that there are a lot of beliefs, a lot of things, how we perceive the offer should be made, the negotiations should be made, how we perceive the clients should be spoken to, or whatsoever. This dear sir, madam kind of approach. And I'm very lucky to see the difference in that people are also, after the pandemic, maybe becoming more humane, more natural in how we connect, and that's so easy when it happens.
I'm crossing my fingers, for yes, for best case scenario kind of thing, after the pandemic, as you mentioned. I'm not sure yet, but I'm certainly crossing my fingers for that, absolutely.
Well,
And
optimistic always.
yes, and I would just say that, I think there's a very strong case to be made for authenticity, because authenticity is about transparency, is about clarity. I think it's the doorway as well to mindfulness. Mindfulness, not just in being mindful and kind of conscious of the present moment, which is what that's about, but also mindfulness in communication. And so that we can invest in right speech, right? In saying things that will serve the greater good kind of thing, and a conscious use of language, I think, is a great place to start. Innovative companies nowadays, they're, I think, looking for new vocabulary. Authenticity came out of that search, came out of that desire, or out of that aspiration. um, and certainly we see, I mean, I was invited recently to give a training on positive communication for a specific banking consultancy, like a company that is interested in that. Like, that wouldn't have been that common, I don't know, 10 years ago or so. So companies are looking for this kind of thing. There's yes, the field is pregnant with with this this kind of desire, and with these kinds of values, right? Understanding that we need to connect better, that we need to connect better because we need to, not just to do business, but if we focus on that connection, the business will then flow. That's
Yeah.
without the stress of privileging business, exclusively. Yeah.
And we are almost closing, but I just can't waste the opportunity, and I wanted to ask you one question that will be very difficult. And probably, but we have time, so take time to think about it, and let me just ask it, and then I will maybe speak for 5 seconds more so you can think. We are in front of a weekend, and then we will have another work week, and generally whatever the time will be when people will listen to us, they will have some work time, they will have some free time afterwards. And I would like to hear from you some tips, some suggestion on how to connect better with our peers, just a simple tip that we could implement straightforward after listening, and on the weekend, on the weekday, every day, that we can think about this connectedness, make being more human to human in our relations. What would be
I
your
mean,
tip for us?
that's actually, you said it was difficult, but that's actually an easy one. And I think it's easy because I didn't have to come up with it. It's just something that, there are authors out there that talk about this, but I relate to this so much that I don't feel the need to reinvent the wheel on that one, because I think that this says it all. I think the key, and I don't want to sound religious or anything, that's not my goal at all, but I will explain. I mean, the key there is to pray for other people's happiness. When you do that, so in whatever way, right? When I say pray, meditate in an organic kind of way, like, oh my God, I wish them the best. I hope everything goes well. Even or especially, when we're thinking of people that maybe we're not so fond of, or people that we feel don't have our best interests in mind, and so on. But still, understand that, by wishing them the best, not only are we clearing our own path, but we're actually expanding ourselves, and we're understanding that, we make mistakes. Human beings are very complicated. All of us, right? We make mistakes, but it's understanding that those mistakes that we make don't define our essence. Quite the opposite. We are disconnected from who we truly are when we perpetrate those mistakes, and other people are no exception, right? So that's key, to really pray for someone's happiness and to wish them the best. So before any meeting, any business meeting or any personal meeting, to just kind of think, right, okay, who's going to be there, and just kind of have a moment, like closing your eyes and just kind of visualizing the best interaction possible, and pray that when you're there, you can just uplift everyone's energy. That it's not so important if you get the deal or not, or whatever. That's ultimately, that's not what's gonna feed you spiritually.
Wow. All right,
So
I'm taking the challenge. I'm taking the challenge. Thank you for this. It I believe it will set some right attitudes for the meetings, for the mood, for the joy of coming together with someone that you think good of, think good for. It should make life easier. Thank you very
so
much for this and for the conversation.
thank you so much. My pleasure, Radek. Always a pleasure to interact with you. I want to say publicly, congratulations on your podcast, and congratulations on all your initiatives. That I'm a huge fan. I'm a true fan, as they say. And yes, I wish you all the best in your undertakings. Okay.
Likewise, and we had a great practice of this, thinking good of the other people. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
And for everyone, have a great weekend ahead.